Deepak?
Parth, shall we start now?
Start, sir.
Okay.
Okay. So, good morning, all dear teachers. Welcome to
Start, sir.
welcome to 6th online informative session on transdisciplinarity and T-shaped learner. So thank you very much to all teachers who have responded. And the today's speaker is Professor Leung from the Leung University College, Australia. So I request his associate, Professor Shri, to introduce today's speaker. Professor Shri, please.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and hello to everyone. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. I'm not a professor, I'm a Chief Operating Officer for the proposed University of Lincoln in Sydney, Australia. I'm privileged and really excited to introduce you all. Associate Professor Dr. Leung, who works in University of Technology in the School of Business, and also I'm humbled to say he is part of our academic board, Australia. Her most recent
in the School of Business, and also I'm humbled to say she is part of our academic board, Australia. Organizers, check. Organizers, someone's Path Live is open. Please close it. Organizers.
Hello, Dr. Shri?
Yeah, can I start?
Yeah, your Parth Drive also is on there.
Yes.
So
can you
please
hear me?
mute that. Please mute that.
Please close it, organizers.
Okay, can I go ahead?
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, can I start? Yeah, your Parth Drive also is on there. Yes.
Yes.
So can you mute that?
What do you want me to mute?
You should mute voice of your Parth Live. If it is on,
Sir, it can be muted, or he can also exit from there to avoid any confusion. Yes. What do you want to do?
Can you hear me now?
Mute voice of your Parth Live.
All right, I'll continue, guys. Can I go ahead?
yeah, you go ahead.
Okay, she wrote a number of books based on technology, and her more recent book on technology of refuse, Rethinking Digital Divides, is a culmination of her research on the design of available, accessible, and affordable technology products and services for the most of the communities in the remote places. Her second book is the Digital Experience, Design, Ideas, Industries, and Interactions. And so on. She wrote a number of books, and she's very popular and well-known professor here.
The second book is a Digital Experience, Design, Ideas, Industries, Interaction. And so on. She wrote a number of books, and she's very popular.
It draws from our disciplines of technology studies, media communication studies, and anthropology and cultural studies. So I'll hand over to Dr. Leung to start her lecture on this today's topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shri. And thank you to the Mumbai University Teachers Association. It's a great honor to be able to present to you today. I'm just going to, so do I share my screen now?
Yeah, you can continue.
Okay, all right. Greetings from Sydney, Australia, and greetings to all of you in India today and everyone online. I hope you are safe and well. Thank you also to Srini and Dr. Amir from Lincoln University, Australia, for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to talk to you today. So my talk is called Transdisciplinarity and the T-shaped learner. So transdisciplinarity, it's a big word, but really what I'm talking about is the movement between fields of study, or other people might call it interdisciplinarity, or being multidisciplinary. So I'm talking about different disciplines of study and what happens when researchers like myself traverse or travel between those disciplines, or you bring teams of people together from different disciplines.
Yes, it has started, sir. Yes, it has started, sir. You can come online.
Can I continue?
Yeah.
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 Okay.
Yeah.
So transdisciplinarity is one kind of concept I would like to explore today, and the idea of the T-shaped learner. So as educators, many of you would probably have heard of the model of T-shaped learning, which is about, which concerns generalist skills, which forms the horizontal part of the T, in contrast to disciplinary expertise, which and in-depth knowledge and expertise in a particular area, which is represented by the vertical part of the T. And so learning, as we kind of understand it, is a combination of those things, of generalist and specialist skills and knowledge. So I think to begin, it might be useful to talk about my own transdisciplinarity and the disciplines that I have moved around in over the course of my academic career. So I started my undergraduate study in media and communications. So I'm just going to try and, yep. So I started as an undergraduate in media and communication studies, which, well, back then was also considered a new and emerging field of study or an emerging discipline. So we're talking about how studying media, and back then it was mass media. We're talking about print and broadcasting, radio and film, and how those media communicate to audiences. So like I said, that was an emerging discipline at the time, and informed very much by also British cultural studies. So I don't mean British culture, but I mean cultural studies as a discipline emerging from the UK. That very much was part of my master's degree. That kind of cultural studies background was part of my postgraduate studies, at the Institute of Education at the University of London. And then when I went on to do a PhD, I went into the area of technology studies, or back then it was internet studies, because it was the very early days of the internet. That combined with cultural studies led to a kind of field of study known as cyber cultural studies. So cultures of the internet, online communities, online cultures. So then, whilst finishing my PhD, I moved into industry and worked in digital media. So bear in mind, this was the 1990s, if those of you can remember sort of Y2K and early days of web development and web design. I worked in the digital media industry as it was then, and then went back into academia when I returned to Sydney, and was a senior lecturer in interactive media at the University of Technology, Sydney. And so then I was teaching very much in an emerging field, where a lot of that kind of work was starting to become professionalized, where web standards started becoming part of the profession of being a digital media professional. But also as an academic, I was researching in the area of human-computer interaction, how people were interacting with technologies, how communities adopt technologies, how they mobilize around technologies, and who also, what groups and communities are actually left out of technology design and use. And so from there, I moved into innovation studies. So at the heart of a lot of innovation is technology. And so upon moving into innovation studies, I also transitioned to the business school. So that tells you something about my, where I have gone in terms of traversing different disciplines. But there's also a kind of parallel narrative around institutions and how they manage different disciplines. So what's interesting is that when I joined the University of Technology, Sydney, to direct postgraduate studies in interactive media, I didn't join a faculty. So universities traditionally are organised into faculties and departments of specialisation, right? But when I joined UTS in the area of interactive media, I didn't join a faculty. A course like that, I was directing a Masters of Interactive Media, had to actually sit outside of a faculty. It sat outside in an institute of interactive media and learning. So I think that's an interesting kind of observation about transdisciplinarity and how it is dealt with on an institutional basis. That Masters of Interactive Media was a very successful program because it was designed to be transdisciplinary. It was designed to attract people from different backgrounds, different disciplines, and attract them into IT, essentially into technology careers. And so we had people applying who had studied to be teachers, who'd been architects, who'd been filmmakers, who were from computer science backgrounds, who were looking to make a sideways move into IT, or were looking to be much more digitally literate in their careers. So because that course actually sat outside of a faculty, eventually the university said, well, you really need to be in a faculty, right? So we can't have teaching outside of faculty, so you must move into a faculty, right? But as a transdisciplinary program, we had to kind of make a decision about, where do we move to? Do we move into a faculty of design? Do we move into a business school? Do we move into a faculty of engineering and IT? And eventually the whole course moved into engineering and IT. And so it moved under a faculty and moved into a kind of disciplinary, under a disciplinary umbrella of engineering and IT. And so then what happened was they started changing the course, right? They decided that it could no longer be transdisciplinary within a faculty of engineering and IT, and that it then had to become part of a more kind of generic IT master's degree with a specialisation in interactive media. So interestingly, as the program moved into a faculty, it started becoming much more shaped by the disciplines of that faculty, and becoming less transdisciplinary. So following that, I was asked to move over to the UTS Business School and bring much more digital knowledge and expertise, and try and infuse that into business programs, management programs. And so I changed roles and became and directed a postgraduate degree in creative industries management, so management of creative industries. So that in itself then was again a much more from becoming quite narrow within a faculty of engineering and IT. Again, I was asked to bring a transdisciplinary approach to business programs in the UTS Business School. And so you see my title there was Associate Professor of Arts, Culture and Digital Creative Industries. Digital industries being part of that umbrella of creative industries, which in itself is very multidisciplinary. So creative industries includes visual and performing arts, film and television, all the kind of design disciplines, writing, architecture, marketing and communications also counts as a creative industry, and of course, software and digital industries as well. So I think one of the clear challenges of being transdisciplinary is that this sense of always being in between, you're in between two disciplines at least. You're of having a kind of a sense of always being on the kind of periphery of disciplines, because you're always in between. You're always at the intersection of those disciplines. So you don't have that kind of sense of belonging, belonging within any one discipline. And I also think that university structures, particularly faculty structures, are not particularly conducive to being transdisciplinary, as I said, so faculty structures, departmental structures within universities are set up for research and deep research in particular disciplinary areas. So they're not necessarily conducive to those disciplines working together and working between disciplines as well. So I think, let me see what's there. So I think so one thing I would say as well in this is that so one of my experience of being transdisciplinary in a particular university is that I had to sit outside of a faculty type of structure. Another approach to transdisciplinarity within the university was then to set up a whole separate faculty, which they named Transdisciplinary Studies. Okay, so because the existing faculties could not or found it very challenging to be working together, to be collaborating, to have students moving around those faculties and disciplines, one approach was to actually set up an entirely transdisciplinary faculty. And what's interesting about that is that they set up a degree program called the Bachelor of Creative Intelligence and Innovation, which is a double degree program. So students do their first degree in a particular faculty, whether they're, whether it be faculty of science or health or pharmacy or engineering or business, whatever it might be. And then the second degree, the Bachelor of Creative Intelligence and Innovation, brings those students together in learning environments to work on wicked learning problems. And by that, I mean very complex kind of social problems that really can only be solved by having different disciplines working together, much like the kind of situation we are in now. So that degree program became so popular that they had thousands of applications for what started off as 30 places. So so it had a huge demand for that particular kind of transdisciplinary degree program. And so I think that's, again, that is very telling about what learners today, perhaps young people today, are wanting in their education, in their higher education. And it may speak to that the kind of loss that we have here anyway in Australia of the traditional liberal arts degree. You know, a liberal arts degree being a degree with no particular specialisation, you know, that really only concentrates on that horizontal part of the T-shaped learner, you know. You know, where you would be studying political science, philosophy, history, yeah, all sorts of different subjects as part of your economics, you know, as part of your degree program. And there is less emphasis on that kind of depth of knowledge. I would see myself as this kind of T-shaped learner, given the number of disciplines that I have traversed, and given that many of those disciplines are new disciplines or emerging fields of study. I see myself as much more of this kind of T-shaped learner, versus I would argue the kind of T-shaped learner here that universities are designed to produce, you know. So I think this kind of T on the right is much more representative of the kind of learner that stays within one field of study, but is looking to specialise in one area only. And I think that this kind of T-shaped learner is the result of universities having feeling pressure to produce graduate employment outcomes, and of learners also indicating that they want to be employable as soon as they finish a degree program. So I guess one of the questions would be, how do we prepare our students for interdisciplinary collaboration in or transdisciplinarity that's necessary, given that they will have, you know, 5 to 7 careers in their lifetime, you know, and even more jobs, as you know, more than that in terms of jobs. 5 to 7 careers. So I think one of the questions is this kind of T-shaped learner appropriate for the kind of employment environment that young people will be facing now, you know? And if we are thinking more of designing this sort of T-shaped learner on the left, how do we adapt our learning infrastructure to support that? So my own experience of Australian universities is that higher education structures, you know, don't facilitate transdisciplinarity particularly well yet. What is interesting is that in 2015, Australia actually ranked #1 on the Global Creativity Index. So this is not an exercise in boasting. I think it's just interesting to look at what this might mean in the context of transdisciplinarity. So the Global Creativity Index and they haven't produced one since. This is the last one that they've produced back in 2015. I think they might come out every 5 years. But it's a report that looks at, well, in the 2015 version, looked at 139 different countries. Measured them according to three criteria that also start with T. That is talent, the extent to which its citizens have access to education and training to be able to enter whatever industry that they want, the other T is technology. To what extent does that country have a good technology infrastructure that facilitates innovation, that facilitates online learning, and a mobile workforce as well. And then the other T, the final T, is tolerance. So that's more a measure of culture, so to what extent does a country kind of tolerate diversity or accept and embrace diversity in and of itself, or welcome migrants and difference. I find it, it was very fascinating that Australia actually topped number one. This was back in 2015, and I think what the report speaks to also is transdisciplinarity. These are the kind of ingredients that are needed to facilitate transdisciplinary collaboration and creativity and innovation. So for those of you who are not familiar with this report or the Martin Prosperity Institute, it's the work, it's based on the work of Richard Florida, who has done a lot of work around creative classes and creative industries. He's written a book around the creative class. So how cities become gentrified through the influx of a creative class, and what he's talking about is creative industries. How do cities become creative industries hubs, and they're hubs of transdisciplinarity, So here we've got Australia. So bear in mind, this is 5 years old, but Australia did not rank top for technology. It was number 7 out of 139 for technology. It was number 1 for talent. So that's an indicator of its education system, vocational and higher education system, and infrastructure, and number 4 for tolerance. So, but then I think averaged out, they come up with this particular number, which puts it at number 1 on the Global Creativity Index.
Ma'am, this is a technical check. Please share your PPT slides by doing screen share.
Am I not screen sharing at the moment?
No.
I'm not screen sharing. Oh, hang on. Okay, all right. Apologies.
Yes, ma'am. Now your screen is on, and please.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
ma'am.
so
Thank you.
sorry about that. Okay, so I'll just trot back through. So that was my slides. I was talking about all the different disciplines that I have traversed. Yeah, that's where I ended up in the UTS Business School after being in an institute and then in a Faculty of Engineering and IT and then over to the UTS Business School. These are the kind of creative industries that I was talking about that in and of themselves are very multidisciplinary. And when I was talking about the challenges of transdisciplinarity, you know, that kind of sense of being on the peripheries of various disciplines and being in between and not really belonging to any particular discipline. And that, you know, and again, this is my opinion only, that university faculty structures are really at the moment not very conducive to transdisciplinarity. And when I talk about the T-shaped learner, that, you know, there's various types of T's that we can look at. So like I said, the kind of T-shaped learner that I would classify myself as is one with that kind of broad horizontal part of the T and you know, only a moderately deep kind of expert knowledge in any one discipline, because I've traversed a whole lot of disciplines, and most of those have been new disciplines or emerging fields, versus this kind of T, which I'm saying that universities tend to be structured around this kind of T-shaped learner with very deep disciplinary knowledge in one area. Okay, and this was the Global Creativity Index that I was talking about, that where Australia surprisingly topped the index in 2015 based on these 3 criteria. And my argument here is that those criteria are also intrinsic, necessary, critical to transdisciplinarity. And so this here is the ranking. So you can't see all the countries here. There's 139 countries that they looked at, yeah. So these are just the top 25. So I think what is telling about these countries as well, and what is telling about that the popularity of the degree program that I was talking about, the Bachelor of Creative Intelligence and Innovation, is that these countries are wealthy countries. They're affluent countries, and in parallel with that, the kinds of students that we saw applying and getting into the Bachelor of Creative Intelligence and Innovation were top performing students who could afford to spend 6 years at university doing double degree programs, because it was such a popular degree program. The marks required to enter that degree program were very, very high. So it meant that only certain types of students then got into that degree. So I think what I'm trying to say here is that even in the context of transdisciplinarity, that can still give rise to inequality, you know, because it says a lot about the kind of resources that are needed to facilitate that kind of transdisciplinary interaction and collaboration and innovation. So, and we also see that in the creative industries, you know, the creative industries being very multidisciplinary. We're seeing that certainly in the digital sector, that there are only women comprise 25% of ICT workers, information and communication technology workers, and they earn 20% less than the men in that sector. In architecture in Australia, again, only a minority of architects in Australia are women. And in film, it's been very clear that many of the kind of feature films are not directed by women. You know, they're primarily directed by men. Again, only a small proportion of those films are written by women, and again, a minority produced by women. And the research into creative industries has been very clear in saying that women, ethnic minorities, and the working class are not gaining the same kind of access to working and participating in the creative industries as much as white middle class men. And the same goes for music. Okay, so this kind of research has been done across creative industries, and the same kind of pattern is emerging. That's certainly in music, because arts funding has decreased in real terms, and that the cost of further and higher education are becoming out of reach to the working class, meaning that these disciplines are becoming very gentrified. Yeah, and you know, we've seen it in popular culture as well through, you know, criticism of events like the Oscars and the whole nominations process of films. The Academy Awards, you know, has been looked at over its 85 years, and you know, it's clear that, you know, people of colour and women are in the minority when it comes to who is commended and who is celebrated. Emmy Awards are the same. This has been done in relation to even particular kinds of films, science fiction films, and in theatre. So the Tony Awards, theatre awards. In books, even in books, who is represented in children's writing and in bestsellers, and not just who is represented in those books, but who is writing those books. And then in Silicon Valley as well, you know, this is also well known, that even in the IT industry, which is really one area where we think there might be, you know, diversity, that really, if you look at it in Silicon Valley, women represent a minority, and it's still largely white or Asian. So I think in those terms, yeah, I mean, I think I have more questions than answers, really. So how might we rethink structures, particularly learning structures, higher education structures, to facilitate transdisciplinarity? And how do we think about access to transdisciplinarity? You know, who does it benefit ultimately? You know, we need transdisciplinarity to facilitate innovation, to solve the world's most pressing problems. But, you know, who benefits most from that? Who has a seat at the table, at that transdisciplinary table to help solve those problems? And how do we address inequalities in transdisciplinary education and industries? Because transdisciplinarity is certainly a very virtuous objective, but we also need to think about the kinds of inequalities that it can generate as well, as we've seen in the creative industries. So I think that is my last slide. Yeah. And how am I going for time? So I've spoken for about 45 minutes now, and I'm happy to take questions.
Yes, ma'am. So I'm just asking you the questions. They have started coming in from the participants.
Okay.
So the first question, ma'am, I'm just reading out the first question. So this is a question by Dr. Manali Londe. So the question from Dr. Manali Londe, who is in charge principal, SK Somaya College of Arts, Science and Commerce, Mumbai, is that is Indian philosophy a part of curriculums taught in any Australian universities? Is Indian philosophy a part of curriculum taught in any Australian universities? Yeah.
Yes, so as I mentioned briefly in the talk, that really we've seen the disappearance of that kind of traditional liberal arts education in Australia. You know, so it was probably disappearing when I started going to university. You know, it was probably more a product of the 60s, of the 1960s, where, you know, students went to university and had to study philosophy. Now, not only do we not have any kind of exposure to Indian philosophy, many students don't have any exposure to any philosophy at all, any kind of philosophical education when they go through university. So it would be quite common, I would say, if for a student doing a business degree, not to have any experience of learning philosophical traditions, or any of those other kinds of liberal arts subjects.
Okay, great. So we have another question, ma'am. This question is again from Dr. Manali Londe, who is in charge principal, SK Somaya College of Arts, Science, Commerce. And her question is, she is basically asking you, what are your views on hermeneutical methods needed in this field than empirical methods? I'm just repeating the question. Ma'am, what are your views for this field? What are your views on hermeneutical methods vis-a-vis empirical methods?
I don't, it would be good to have some examples, but I'm I'm a practice-based researcher, so I'm much more familiar probably with empirical methods.
Okay.
So
All right.
yeah, my approach, and that's not necessarily saying that that's the right approach, but that's been my training. My training has been more in empirical methods and impact-based research. Yeah, that has tangible outcomes. Yeah, for communities.
Sure, sure. So it's the empirical methods for which you've been working for a long time. So absolutely. Now let us take another question. Yeah. So the next question has come from it's from Professor Suhas Morale, who has been the former director students welfare of Dr. BAM University Aurangabad, and he wants to ask you, ma'am, what are the challenges of transdisciplinary studies in rural area learners? So his question is, what are the kind of specific challenges of transdisciplinarity studies in rural area learning? In rural area learners. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a great question, really, because one could argue that transdisciplinarity only works with a certain kind of scale, because you need a number of people, and you need them to come from diversity of backgrounds in order to be able to collaborate. On a particular problem or research project. But I think the kinds of circumstances that we find ourselves in now, with the pandemic and with people having to isolate, shows the kind of innovation that's possible at a distance. So transdisciplinarity does not necessarily mean that all those different areas of expertise need to be in the same room. They can still collaborate at a distance. And from a learning perspective, I think, again, it's possible. I mean, to deliver teaching and learning and transdisciplinary kinds of teaching and learning in ways that doesn't necessarily require the educator to be in the same classroom as the students. It doesn't even require students to be in the same room, but it does require innovative teaching and learning methods.
Thank you, ma'am. Let's have another question. Now, this question is asked by Ms. Antara Sonavne, who is the Vice Principal of Hinduja College, Mumbai. And her question is, what is the strategy to be adopted for Indian students, especially who are in huge numbers? So strategy with reference to T-shaped learner. So her question, once again, I'm repeating, what is the strategy to be adopted with reference to T-shaped learner for Indian students, especially who are in huge numbers?
So you're talking about, how to cultivate T-shaped learners when you have large numbers of students. Yeah. So I think any university, faces that problem, because universities operate at scale with large numbers of students. One of the things that we have tried to do at UTS is to embed peer learning in everything that we do. So ensuring that even when we have large numbers of students in a particular subject, that that they have the opportunity to learn in small groups and have the benefit of peer-to-peer learning. So, and to move away from that kind of that sort of chalk and talk model or sage on the stage model of learning, and try and have students work in small groups. Again, that works fine for students in a particular unit or subject, but I haven't seen that done at scale with students from different disciplines across a university. So it may be that there are subjects that are available to students from whatever faculty they are from, and students from different disciplines can come together in a particular subject and then be grouped, in diverse groupings with students from different faculties and work together on a particular problem. I haven't seen that done at scale. But I think it's possible. As an aim, it's a fantastic aim. But I think, there needs to be more willingness for institutions to do that. My understanding is really that doesn't happen because it's often not in a faculty's interest to do that, and it's often not in a faculty's financial interest to do that. They tend to keep students in a particular faculty so that funding stays in that faculty. If they allow students to go across the university to other faculties to learn other subjects, that funding flows with the student. And so that means funding goes off to other areas of the university, and usually university deans do not want that. So there, they are the kind of structural issues around facilitating that kind of transdisciplinary learning with large numbers of students across the university.
Thank you very much, ma'am. And Professor Suhas from Aurangabad is specifically very happy and is thanking you for the quick and immediate response that you gave for his question. So with that, I think all the questions that have been received, most of the other questions that I have received are more or less, covered from the answers that were given in the past 3 questions. So, sir, over to you.
Sir, Dr. Amiya sir want to share his view with regards. Honorable Dr. Amiya sir. Amiya sir, unmute your mic.
All right. Okay. I just wanted to share about hermeneutical and empirical method. And Dr. Linda has very categorically mentioned that she is more onto empirical. Now, I must say the Western society is handling more empirical, direct research-based activities rather than desktop-oriented research. So hermeneutical more related to desktop, theory-based, and book-based and so forth. That's to my understanding. So what will happen if any society like India need to move from the level where they are, need to look at more empirical what is happening in the current scenario, take that research material and put it into action, they move forward. Today, China has gone, so much huge because they are more into empirical oriented. So that's what I wanted to share. Another question, I just saw something which Dr. Nitin Arekar has mentioned from CHM College, that while skills a learner should have while acquiring which skill. Now, I must say the most of the Western societies or developed countries, they are preparing their human resources more onto multidisciplinary approach rather than focus only concentrated approach. So transdisciplinary will be, you learn everything, but you have your core. So what happens is when you have your core and you also learn transdisciplinary, this is like you are preparing yourself to handle crisis management. Crisis management like COVID-19. And in the COVID-19, if I am specialized only one particular focus, and if I do not know other things to handle, then this kind of crisis, one has to do all types of things. So the learner should be ready to have transdisciplinary. Learner should be ready to create himself multitasking human personality rather than focus on the simple. However, he or she has to focus certain skill which he or she likes most, focus that one, but at the same time associate skill with which society needs. So I think the question is which skill a learner should have, that will be the core skill. And that core skill should depend upon the learner, not the parents are forcing, not the society is forcing. So it is the individual learner, what his or her interest, focus on to this, plus take other transdisciplinary and move forward. That's what. See, my bachelor degree is biology and my master degree comes under psychology. Then I went into MBA. So I have accumulated transdisciplinary approach, but I am focusing, delivering my lecture management oriented. That's what I thought. Thank you. Sorry, Linda, to take up your time. I thought I just jack in a little bit. You know how that teacher's behavior is.
No, it's really interesting, Dr. Amir. I think you're right. I think there's a question about whether, so you picked up your transdisciplinarity, as I have, by moving between different degree programs, right? So,
right.
But can we deliver transdisciplinarity within a 3-year undergraduate degree? I think that's more than possible. I think that's something that that universities used to offer in the form of a liberal arts type of degree, which was intended to build a kind of well-rounded learner, you know, a well-rounded citizen who could then go out into the workforce and do any of a number of types of jobs. But now I think the pressure, there's a lot of pressure and a tendency to be trying to cultivate a much more specialized type of graduate, you know, one that can graduate from an engineering degree and immediately become an engineer, you know, rather than that sort of well-rounded citizen, global citizen lifelong learner. Yeah, I think the educational trends have changed, and that's why we're seeing a different shaped kind of tea.
That's right.
Thank you, ma'am. Sorry, there is another question. Sorry,
Sure, please go ahead.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So, Linda, ma'am, there's another question for you. It is from Dr. Nitin Arekar of CHM College, Mumbai. And his question to you, ma'am, is what are the skills that a learner should have while acquiring transdisciplinary approach? Yeah.
So
I think that has been taken by Dr. Amey.
Yeah,
okay,
I think Amir answered that.
I'm so sorry. I think okay. There's another quick question.
Just wanted to add, I have just finished my entrepreneurship lecture to my medical students. They are medical students, 5th-year medical students. I have completed entrepreneurship lecture, and I have given them a project that they have to go into Facebook marketing. And my medical students are excited. So that's kind of transdisciplinary. They are excited. Wow, sir, we can earn money while COVID staying back home. So you can, and this is a mandatory in my university, no matter what. So it all depends upon the university, how you execute what you want to do this. Thank you.
So that's a beautiful explanation for transdisciplinary studies. Now, another question that is from Professor Ashfaq Karim, who is the Associate Professor, Rizvi College of Commerce, Arts and Science, Mumbai. And his question is, Linda ma'am, so will public funding of education boost transdisciplinary learning? Will public funding boost transdisciplinary learning? That's his question.
I'm not sure that what the connection is necessarily between public funding and transdisciplinarity, because I think in Australia we have seen a public system, that kind of T-shaped learner has changed under a public university system in Australia. But I think there is something to be said about a kind of a model of privatization, which again is something that has happened within the Australian university system, and that is having moved from a fully funded public free university system to now one where students must it's fee paying, but students actually borrow money or take out loans in order to study, and then they pay that back through the taxation system. So in that context, where which is essentially privatized because the student is paying for their own education, in that kind of environment, a student is looking for return on their investment. They are looking for degree programs that will ensure that they that will maximize the possibility of their employment once they graduate, so that they can then pay back their loan. And so I'm sure that very much informs that sort of long T shape that I was talking about, that's much more focused on sort of graduate outcomes, on, kind of vocationally oriented education that will lead to a specific job in a particular industry. So yeah, I mean, I do think there is a connection there between, how public or private a particular higher education system is. But I think the world now needs much more transdisciplinary collaboration and ways of working in order to solve complex global problems. You know, that's not a want, that's a need. And so it's something that all higher education systems are going to have to adapt to. And that will mean reflecting and rethinking their perhaps their particular infrastructures and the ways that learning is designed.
Thank you very much, ma'am. We now can move on to the final part of the session.
Okay, thank you very much, Linda ma'am, and thanks to Honorable Dr. Amiya sir for sharing his views. And what I got, the knowledge only is not important, we should acquire the skills also. That is what the message Amiya sir is giving. Now, I request our General Secretary Subhash Athavale, please give vote of thanks and some instructions regarding the today's attendance of all the participants. Athavale sir, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vaibhav. First of all, the subject which was there under Shri Dattopant Thegadi lecture series, today it was the 6th session conducted by Professor Linda. During her lecture, she had very well explained that how this T-shaped learner is going to be important in recent times. She had very well explained the different T sizes where she had shown the broad road of subjects and how you can go deep rooted inside in a particular subject to acquire excellence in that subject. She also had mentioned about the global creativity index and how one should work towards achieving this global creativity index. She had very well mentioned about 3 T's, that is talent, then technique and tolerance to achieve the success. I, from Mumbai University and College Teachers Association, thank Professor Linda Leung for her wonderful session and giving clear insight for the T-shaped learners and the transdisciplinary approach towards it. My sincere thanks are to Dr. Amey Bhaumik, who has been helping us in organizing this lecture series through his university as well. My thanks are due to Mr. Shri for his support and assistance for arranging Professor Linda to be there on today's session. I will, if I'll forget to thank Mr. Ashish Dikshit from Path Life Technologies, Path Knowledge Technologies, sorry, without whose support we would not have reached to such a large number. At present, I think more than 1,000 teachers across India are listening to this program. My thanks are also due to all those participants who have actively taken out their time and made it a point to attend this session. Last announcement about the attendance today for the certificate purpose. We will be shortly putting up the link for the attendance today on our website, that is www.mucta teachers, and from there they can put their details for the purpose of certificates. This link shall be open only for 1 hour duration. After that, this link shall be closed down, and those who will register in on that link, they will get the certificates. As I have told you, this is an auto-generated system, and the certificates shall directly reach to their email addresses. So those who will register with that link for their attendance, they only will get the certificates for the participation for today's program. I thank each and everyone for making this today's program a grand success. Thank you very much. Thank you to all.
Yes, thank you, sir. Thank you. One correction is there. We are posting the attendance link on Facebook, not our website.
Yeah, Facebook.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Vaibhav sir, Ashish here, just one, half a minute for this is a question on the benefit of all the participants who have, some of them have not received the certificates of the previous sessions. So if we can quickly, announce what is the process for those participants who have not received the certificates for previous sessions, then they will get that clarity.
Yeah, I'll just explain. Those who have missed out the certificates of last sessions, for them I'll make an announcement that those who have already filled in the through the link, they have received. As I told that this is an auto-generated system, they can send their email on mukta.teachers@gmail.com. If they have not received the certificate of the previous sessions, they should mention their name, their college name, their email address, and the date of the session with which they have attended, so that it will be easy for us to send the certificates to them. Is it clear to all of you?
Yes, sir. I
Over
think
to
it is
Ashish, sir.
very clear. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I am done from my side, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now we are
Thank
ending
you.
the session.
All.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you,
Linda.
sir. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Amir sir.
Bye. Yes, yes.
Amir sir.
Yes, yes, sure.
Yeah. So now we have dislodged from this path knowledge,
Okay.
and